The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Without further ado, we would like to hand over to the co-prosecutor to proceed with the questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. When we left off, we were talking about the evacuation of Udong, and you had just confirmed that you remembered being interviewed by Philip Short. Mr. President, at this time I'd like to present to the witness a excerpt from Philip Short's book that contains a quote from the witness. The document is E3/9. It is English ERN 00396-465, French ERN 00639-786 through 639787, and Khmer ERN 00755-582. And I have a hard copy to show the witness, and would like to put that on the screen too, with your permission.
The President, International Co-Counsel for Mr. Kisampon, you may now proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I object to the manner in which the prosecutor is proceeding. I haven't done so far because I object now because the references as suggestive are leading. We know that the witness can read the documents before testifying in court. But now we see the prosecutor trying to refresh the witness's memory by mentioning a book by Mr. Short without having asked him to confirm the points on which the prosecutor wants to put questions to him. I object to this manner of proceeding because it is leading.
The President, co-prosecutor, you may now proceed to respond to what counsel for Kisampon indicated.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. There's absolutely nothing leading about this question. The witness has already testified to his knowledge of Udong, talked about these matters. This book contains a quote from him that elaborates further, and we're certainly entitled to present that to him, to ask him to confirm that he provided that information, and use this book, which is admitted before the chamber, to further provide further detail about this event.
the President, the objection and the argument supporting the objection by counsel for Mr. Kilsompon are not sustained. The Chamber wishes to hear the response from the witness to the question posed to him. Court officer is now instructed to bring the hard copy of the document from the co-prosecutor to the witness for examination before questions are put to him.
And Mr. President, if we have that prepared to show on the screen, if the court would like us to also display the Khmer version on the screen for everybody. Mr. Witness, while you're reading that, let me read for the record the exact section that I wanted to ask you about from Philip Short's book. The passage reads as follows, quote, "Finally, in March 1974, came the evacuation of Udong. According to Pol's aide, Pipun, quote, it worked well in the sense that there weren't any big problems for us in resettling the evacuees from Udong in the countryside, and on their side, the town dwellers didn't cause any special difficulties either. It was a radical solution designed to foil any attempt by the enemy to destabilize our forces. And at the same time, it was an internal measure because for our cadres, if they were living close together with the urban population, there was a risk that they would be politically and ideologically corrupted. They might be influenced by the new urban environment. If the town dwellers were evacuated, that risk was avoided. You must understand that the final goal was the liberation of Phnom Penh, and to that end, we had to sharpen our political and ideological stance. Was it so our cadres would avoid the sugar-coated bullets of the bourgeoisie? Yes." End of quote. Can you tell us, first of all, whether this is a accurate statement of what you told Philip Short about the evacuation of Udong?
Answer. He asked me a question, and that was my response then.
And when you said that the purpose of the evacuation of Udong was to, quote, foil any attempt by the enemy to destabilize our forces, end of quote, and to prevent cadres from being politically and ideologically corrupted by the urban population, how had you learned that that was the purpose of the evacuation of Udong? From whom did you learn that?
Answer. As I stated earlier this morning, I learned it through his presentation at each study session. Either Nuon Chea, Pol Pot, or Khisampon presented this idea to us, and that was the experience they learned. And they were good experiences, and we should draw the good points from it in order to finally liberate Phnom Penh. And that's how I learned it.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask you a few more questions about the big meetings in 1971 and 1974 that you mentioned to my colleague earlier. First of all, the meeting in 1971, you indicated that there was two parts to the meeting. First, there was a meeting at the North Zone office for sector that included sector and district cadres, and that after that there was a meeting between the people, the leaders from the center and the zone leaders. And I want to focus on that second meeting between the party center and the zone leaders. My first question is, were you present during that second meeting? Were you on guard at that meeting?
Answer. I already mentioned this morning that the meeting took place in the office near Tropang Prey village. It was held in that jungle. In that meeting, I saw members from each zone participating, and at that time the meeting did not last that long. I was present there as well. I was on guard at the time. And as I said earlier, the content of the meeting was similarly presented. It was similar to the content of the meeting held for the sector and the district leaders.
Who were the leaders from the party center who were present at that meeting?
The meeting at that time was attended by Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, and as for the zone 304, there was Koi Thun, and there were Kai Pok and Dun. And for the zone 203, there were Sao Phum, Phung, and Tum, that is for the east zone. And for the special zone, there was Von Vet. And for the southwest zone, there was Tam Mok, Ta Chong, and Ta Si. As for the northwest, there was Ruh Nhum and Ta Cơ and Ta Tol. As for Sector 103 in Pravihir, there was also a leader from there. As for the northeast zone, there were Ja and Bong Vong. As for Mondulkiri, there was Bong Lang.
Was Q Sampan present at this meeting?
Answer. I did not seem to see him. I think he was at office S71 at the time. It was at the other side of the river. That is a Chinat River.
Mr. President, I'd like to show the witness at this point some photographs that have been admitted before the trial chamber to see if he recognizes them and can help us with the photographs. What I'd like to present to the witness are photographs E3/136, E3/137, and E3/1595.
The President, yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you take the hard copy document for the witness to examine?
And Mr. Witness, before I ask you any specific questions or put these on the screen, the first thing I want to ask you is whether you recognize the location at which these photos were taken. Have you seen these photographs, or have you seen this location before?
Answer. That photo, that is 136, it was the Congress it was the big meeting that I mentioned earlier that was held near Tropang Praya village. I can recall there was a board, that is the floorboard. Yes, and that how I remember it. As for photo 137, I am not that sure of the location, but I saw the background photo of the Lenin and other people. It would point to the same location. As for the other photo, that is 1595, that is rather blurred to me. But I can recall that the roof was a zinc roof, so I believe it was taken at the same location. So all three photos, to my mind, they are taken at the same location. One photo, as I could recall, it was the floorboard, and the other one was the zinc roof. That's how I remember it.
Do you remember who took these photographs?
Answer. At that time, there would only be one person. That was Bong Pong. He was the sole photographer.
And if you could turn back to photograph E3/136, and Mr. President, if we could put this on the screen. We've also, in a copy we can show on the screen, put numbers next to the various people to make it easier to identify if the witness is able to identify the people. So we would like to display that on the screen. I have extra copies of the photograph with the numbers marked for the parties and for the greffier if he would like to keep a copy for the court record as well. But the reason we marked the numbers on was to make it easier for the witness to identify, to ask questions about who people were, and to identify the specific people in the photograph.
The President, you may proceed. The President, Mr. Witness, please wait till you are asked before you speak.
Mr. Witness, if you could start by looking at the people who are standing in the back row of photograph E3/136 and identify them, and if you can use the numbers that are put there, that would be helpful to us too. But can you tell us which people in the back row of the photograph that you are able to recognize?
Answer. Number 1 is Pol Pot. Number 6 is Ya. Number 4 is Nuon Chia. Number 3 is Koi Thun. Number 2 is Tamok. And number 14 is Sao Pum. And to me, the rest is unclear. It's rather blurred to look at.
And the person you identified as Pol Pot, is that the person who's standing at the very far right-hand side? You indicated one. Actually, it appears to be number 10.
Excuse me.
The President, the prosecutor, you cannot put such a question to the witness. Defense counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you. Obviously, he's not happy with the answer. There is a technique. This is not the technique. This is giving the answer to the witness. This is, regrettably, is a technique that should never be used in this court for these purposes. And if we had been doing this, he would be yelling at us. I'd appreciate if the gentleman would simply ask him to point out or to say who he's next to or give another number. But to do it the way he did it is utterly inappropriate, and he knows better.
Mr. President, we're talking about Pol Pot here. I don't think there's a whole lot of controversy about that. The witness clearly did not see the full number when he identified this person, and I'm simply seeking to clarify that. I hardly think this is a matter of great controversy, but I'm happy to have the witness clarify and explain where in the photo the person he identified as Pol Pot is located.
The President, witness, you can respond to that question of the prosecutor. Pol Pot is number 10. Ja is number 6. Nun Chia is number 4. Koi Trun is number 3. And Sapam is number 14. I cannot remember the rest because they are rather unclear.
Thank you for that. Can you now turn to photograph E3/1595? And I recognize that the copies we have of this photograph are also somewhat blurry. But I'd like to direct you to the back row of the photograph and ask you if you are able to identify for us the person who has the number 11 above his head.
Answer. For figure number 11, it seems like it's Omakil Sampon, but I am not 100% sure. It is very difficult to identify it in this blurry photo.
Thank you. We'll see if we happen to have a clearer copy of this photo. Do you see are you in this photo anywhere, Mr. Witness?
Answer. I cannot see myself in the photo. Number 35, that is the wife of Pol Pot.
And looking at these photographs, can you tell us when in 1971 this Congress took place?
Answer. It was held during the rainy season, and the rain at that time was rather heavy. I believe it was in July or August.
Thank you. I have no more questions about the photographs, so we can turn to another subject now, which is the other big meeting that you mentioned to my colleague this morning, which was a meeting in 1974. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, did the meeting in 1974 take place at the same location as the 1971 meeting, or was it at a different location?
The 1974 meeting was held at a far distant location. The first meeting was held near Stung Chinat River, but the second one was near the river bank of Mekong River. It was near Phum Miek, or Miek village near the Dai Krohom, and it was rather a highland area. But the distance was very, very distant, very far.
How many of the party leaders were present at the 1974 meeting, if you recall?
Answer. There were many participants in 1971 meeting, but there were less in the 1974 meeting.
How long did the meeting in 1974 last? Do you recall how many days?
Answer. It lasted more than a fortnight.
And do you remember what time of the year, what month in 1974 that meeting took place?
The 1974 meeting was also held in the rainy season, and it was in July.
Mr. President, at this point, to help refresh the recollection and seek some clarification, I'd like to present and ask the witness about a issue of revolutionary flag, which is the September 1977 issue, which is document E3/11. The specific site is Khmer ERN 000-63162, English ERN 00486-247, and French ERN 00492-836. And we have a copy for the witness and can put the relevant part of the document on the screen too, with your permission.
The President, Defense Counsel for Ieng Sary, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we get to that, perhaps the gentleman may wish to lay a foundation. If, in fact, the witness has never seen that particular revolutionary flag or is unaware of the content, showing him the content in order to now create a memory or validate or expand on what he's testifying is improper. The revolutionary flag, if it's already in, it's in, it's for you to consider. But that should not be used at this point if, in fact, the witness has not seen that edition or has heard of the contents therein. So some questions prior to showing such documents should be posed in order to lay a proper foundation to see whether the witness is competent to answer questions from that particular document. Thank you.
No, Mr. President, the foundation has already been laid. This witness has indicated he was a party member, that he recalled receiving revolutionary flag after liberation. Moreover, I'm going to ask him specifically about a reference to a meeting of the Central Committee from mid-1974 that's referred in this. He's already indicated that he was present at a meeting of the Center, and I simply want him to confirm whether or not the meeting that is described in the revolutionary flag is the meeting that he has been testifying to before us today.
The President, the objection made by International Co-Counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari is not substantiated and therefore not sustained. Court officer is now instructed to bring the hard copy of the document from the co-prosecutor to the witness for examination before he proceeds with the questions he intended to ask the witness. The President, co-prosecutor is advised to give some time to the witness to review the document. The chamber will ask him a few questions concerning his knowledge of the document, whether he has seen the document before or not. Only if he has said he has seen the document that the questions relevant to this should proceed.
Mr. President, just so the translation in English indicated the chamber was going to ask questions. Was that a correct translation?
The President, Mr. Witness, you already have read the document in your hands. Do you recall having seen the documents or read them during the course of your work during the Democratic Cambodia and at a later stage? Response: I have seen some of them. This document dated June. The Congress in June 1974. I have read these documents before. Indeed, there were a lot of documents that I have read, and I don't remember the detail. The President, Mr. Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed with your questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question I wanted to ask you, Mr. Witness, is that this issue of a revolutionary flag refers to a meeting of the party's Central Committee that was held in June 1974 and states as follows, quote, "Our party's Central Committee, in the course of its June 1974 conference, resolved to mount the decisive offensive to liberate Phnom Penh and the entire country," end of quote. My question to you is, does this refresh your recollection that the big meeting in 1974 that we've been talking about took place in June of 1974? You had mentioned July 1974, which is close, but does this refresh your recollection? Do you think that this is the same meeting that we've been talking about?
Response: just now I said it was in July. However, having read the document, it stated that it's June, and I agree that it was in June because I cannot fully recollect the exact date. It was indeed happening during the rainy season.
And do you recall whether one of the issues that was discussed at this meeting in 1974 was mounting the offensive to liberate Phnom Penh?
Response: yes. They were focusing on the attack to liberate Phnom Penh. It was already after Odong was liberated, and it was the meeting was convened to prepare for liberating Phnom Penh.
And you told my colleague already that Ieng Sary had returned at this time, but I just want to again clarify, was this a meeting that Ieng Sary participated in? Was this during the time that he returned to Cambodia in 1974?
Response. I stated the meeting was in 1974. He also attended the meeting, but he didn't stay there quite long. He was there briefly and left.
And in addition, you indicated there were fewer participants at this 1974 meeting. In addition to Ieng Sary, who were the other people, the other leaders that you recall who were present at the June 1974 meeting?
Response. People from all zones came to the meeting. However, the meeting in 1974 was not fully attended by members from the zones as it was conducted in 1971.
Were Pol Pot, Noon Chea, and Khieu Samphan at the 1974 meeting?
Response. Yes, they were. All of them.
And you've indicated that not all the zone leaders were there. Which of the zone leaders do you remember being present at that meeting?
Response. I saw Sao Phum, Koi Thuon, Tamok, Won Wait, Rus Nhum, Son Sen, Ieng Sary. All of these people attended that meeting.
Do you remember whether at this 1974 Central Committee meeting, whether one of the issues that came up was the situation related to a man named Prasit, who had been the leader of the Kokong region? Do you remember whether that issue came up in the 1974 meeting?
Response. No, I don't know.
Do you recall what happened to Prasit, the party leader from Kokong, in 1974?
Response. At Kokong, he was known as Ta Chong, who was representing the province, but he was not present during the meeting. We didn't see him.
Mr. President, to refresh the recollection of the witness, I'd like to refer him to read to him another a passage from Philip Short's book that contains a quote attributed to him. This is a document E3/9, and the translation or the relevant ERN is English 00396-468, French 00639-790-91, and there is unfortunately not a Khmer translation of this particular passage, so I would request leave to read it into the record for the witness.
The President, do you have the document available in Khmer in hard copy?
Mr. President, this is the book written by Philip Short that's in the case file. There's only particular parts of the book that have been translated in Khmer. There is a complete English and a complete French translation. So what I'm proposing to do here is read the quote that's attributed to the witness and have it translated into Khmer for him to then respond to. But we don't have there is not a Khmer translation of the entire Philip Short book at this time.
The President, you may proceed. However, I heard that you would like to provide the document in hard copy to the witness, but you indicated early on that the copy was not available in Khmer. However, you may now proceed, and witness is now advised to put aside the documents in his hand so that he can focus on another question relevant to another piece of document. You may proceed, Co-Prosecutor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, let me read this to you, and this is a section from Philip Short's book that is talking about what happened to Prasit in 1974. Quote, "This was the first time, however, that intra-party conflict had reached into the ranks of the Central Committee. It was the first time, too, that the party leadership had authorized the execution of one of its own members. Prasit's case was discussed at length during the plenum at Mick. Quote, Paul explained, quote, his aide-de-camp Pipon remembered, quote, that the class struggle had become extremely acute, and we had to take a resolute, decisive stance against our enemies. He said that anti-communists and counter-revolutionaries had to be dealt with categorically." End of the quote attributed to you. The passage then continues, "But Pun was not entirely convinced. Prasit, he told himself, was from a national minority as I am. Is that how they think they can treat people like us?" My first question is, do you remember discussing Prasit with Philip Short when he interviewed you a number of years ago?
Response: I'm afraid I don't recollect this. I already stated that he failed to show up in that meeting. It was not normal because normally he would have attended the meeting. So I could not come into detail regarding this.
Fair enough. Were you aware of any party leaders in the 1974 period who were disciplined because they disagreed with party policy?
Response. I have not read in details in the form of documents, so I don't recollect it.
Do you recall whether Hu Yun in 1974 expressed any disagreement with party policies?
Response. I then heard that people who worked together met him and chit-chatted, and Uncle Yun was heard to have disagreed with the evacuation plan. And indeed, there were 80 people who worked at the location. So when we were tasked with guarding the premises, we heard from others about this discussion that Uncle Yun disagreed with the evacuation plan of the people from the city of Phnom Penh.
Was Uncle Yun subject to any tempering or discipline for expressing disagreement with the party's policies?
The President, witness, could you please hold on? Wait until we hear from counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari first. Counsel Ang Adam, you may now proceed. Counsel Ang Adam. Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honors, and the court, and everyone in and around the courtroom. Just now, witness indicated about the meeting and the person by the name of Hu Yun, and he said that he heard from others concerning this individual. So he only heard from other. I should have been on my feet to reject such a question. Now my learned colleague is trying to dwell on this question of this matter again. We should now reject such a line of questioning because the witness said that he heard from others, and such a statement could not be used as evidence. The President, Mr. Co-Prosecutor, would you wish to respond to such objection?
Yes, very, very briefly, Mr. President. That's not a valid objection in this court. There's no hearsay rule. Witnesses are entitled to testify to information that they heard from other sources. So that is not a valid objection.
President, the objection by counsel for Ieng Sary is not sustained. The argument itself was not substantiated. Therefore, the Chamber would like to hear from the witness to the question posed by the co-prosecutor. It appears that the witness may have forgotten the question already, so prosecutor is instructed to repeat the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question was whether Hu Yun was subject to tempering or some other discipline for expressing disagreement with the party's policy.
Response. I, at that time, personally did not see whether he was being tempered or subject to such tempering or not, because he worked at the bases, he attended meetings in areas that were liberated, so he went to the locations more regularly.
Fair enough. I want to turn now, we have a few minutes left before the break, turn now to the events of 17 April 1975, if I may. Can you tell us where were you on the morning of 17 April 1975?
Response. On that day, the 17th of April 1975, I was at the Stocktown office with number 1.
And by, just so the record is clear, by number 1, you're referring to Pol Pot.
Response. Yes, it is. It is referred to Pol Pot.
Where was the Saduk Towel office located in relation to the B5 office that we talked about earlier today?
Response. Stocktown office was 10 kilometers apart from their office. It was more adjacent to the Rasmach location, closer to the front battlefield.
And other than yourself and Pol Pot, who else was at the Saduk Towel office on the morning of 17 April 1975?
Response. There were other people, including the commanders of the battlefields. There were Son Sen, Khoi Thun, Tamok, and Won Wade, who gathered on that day at that location.
Was Kusampan there?
Response. No, he wasn't there on that day.
Do you know where he was located on the 17th of April, 1975?
Response. The President interrupts. Witness, could you please hold down? The question from the co-prosecutor was not properly heard. Perhaps his mic was not activated. Could you please repeat it?
My apologies. The question is, do you know where Q Sampan was located on the 17th of April, 1975?
Response. I just didn't see him in the doctor's office. He could have been at the rare battlefield.
Do you remember whether Noon Chea was at the Seductol office that day?
Response. I didn't see him.
Were you asked by Pol Pot to go into Phnom Penh on the 17th of April, 1975?
Response. No, I wasn't. On the 17th of April, I was with him. There was no assignment. But on the 19th of April, Son Sen went to Phnom Penh, and I went with him. It was on the 19th of April. The President interrupts. Thank you, Mr. Co-Prosecutor and the witness. Since it is now appropriate time for lunch adjournment, the chamber will adjourn until 1:30. Counsel for Mr. Noon Chea, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. Very briefly, I'm informed that our client is suffering from lower back pain, a headache, and a general lack of concentration. Accordingly, he would prefer to retire to the holding cell this afternoon. I'm also informed by our client that these reoccurring conditions are routinely preventing him from actively participating in the proceedings during the afternoon sessions. I wanted to put that on the record. I understand the court is partially in the business of keeping up appearances here. I want to make it very clear that he is not always actively following the proceedings from his holding cell, but the request stands. Thank you.
The President. The chamber has noted the request of Noon Chea through his counsel, asking the chamber to allow him to observe the proceedings from the holding cell for the remainder of the day. The chamber therefore grants such request. Nuon Chea can observe the proceedings for the remainder of the day. He has already waived his right to directly participate in the courtroom. The chamber would like counsel for Nuon Chea to produce the waiver, some printed or signed by Nuon Chea. And AV booth officers are now instructed to ensure that the AV audio links are connected to the holding cell so that Mr. Nuon Chea can observe the proceedings from his holding cell. Security personnel are now instructed to bring all the accused person back to the holding cells and have Mr. Kilsompon return to the courtroom, leaving Nuon Chea in the holding cell where he can observe the proceedings from there. The court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ